Oh gosh, we gotta send her a happy birthday card. Let me see.
Yeah, because I follow her on Instagram and on Facebook.
Yep.
We are live.
Woo.
I don't know if you can hear the music.
Yeah, I can hear it. Are we actually live?
St. Patrick's Day. Wow. Good morning.
Oh my God, I can't believe it's already March 17th. We're in the middle of the month already.
Wow. That
We
is.
just had New Year's.
And Mardi Gras was just, yeah, we just feel like we just had Mardi Gras too.
Weeks ago, yep.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Upon Dulce. I'm Christian Cano, one of your co-hosts. Today is March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. A lot of things are today. Our friend from Texas, it is her birthday today, Cindy Lopez. Hey, Cindy, if you're watching, happy birthday.
Cindy.
Yes, and a lot of other things. I don't know if anybody, the Ides of March was on the 15th, right?
Right.
Does anyone remember that? I remember that's like was that Shakespeare or anyway.
The murder of Julius Caesar.
See, I knew you'd be the learned person that would.
It was commemorated in the Shakespeare play Julius Caesar, but it's actually a historical event where, there you go.
Okay, well, I figured, you probably would know that. So, well, welcome everyone. Let's go around the Brady Bunch screen and everyone introduce yourself. Once again, thank you for joining us on Facebook Live, but also those who join us on YouTube and also on Facebook later on. We have a lot to talk about today. So let us start Facebook.
Steven, Jenny, and then myself.
Okay, so go ahead so we can share us.
All right, I'm Stephen DeFiore. I'm the recording secretary of the Libertarian Party, all around awesome guy. My buttons are End Qualified Immunity and End Certificate of Need. And this is convention season for the LP. So this is super awesome. We're gonna have our Mecklenburg Party convention on the 20th of this month. And then next month, we're gonna have our state party convention. It's gonna be super fun. And if you ain't in the club, you're really missing out. So join the club. And off to the next person.
Jenny-Jaymes again. I'm she, her, they, them pronouns. I am the coordinator for Charlotte Trans Pride, and I also am on the board of directors with now National Organization of Women Charlotte Chapter, and I'm on the board of directors with Charlotte Gamers, which is an LGBT gaming club that does board games, tabletop games, and video games of all types. To create accepting and safe spaces for LGBT people and allies. And my buttons would be Moms Demand Action, Medicare for All, and anything to do with trans rights, which will be kind of the subject today.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Here is Ruth Perez. I'm a community advocate. Here in the show, I'm always called Mama Ruth, since I'm a young, sexy granny. My buttons here today, and it's always been gun sense reform, healthcare for all. I do support now, and I do support equality. Let's see, I sit in different boards. I actually just finished my 3rd week's every 3rd Wednesday of the month is for Charlotte Community Health Clinic. I'm part of the board of directors, providing service for the underinsured community out there. We provide health care and also dental. So if you have any questions, just hit me up and I'll hook you up in there. What else? That's it. Did you get to share a lot of to the pages?
I just did, yeah. Thank you.
I share mine.
Yeah, yes, everyone, thank you for talking slowly because I'm a little slow on sharing us, but
hey,
I'm Christian Cano.
Say, Jenny, I didn't know you were a gamer. I'm a big fan of games. I play D&D with my buddies, so
we gotta
figure it out.
We actually have or this is off topic, but we actually have a thing called QuestCo, which so it sets up quests for people in D&D, and we actually have a kind of a organizer slash trainer for that is also a DM or a dungeon master. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, well, offline I'll share it with you and all that.
Are these games like Miss Pac-Man and Asteroids?
Yeah,
or okay,
anything.
Yeah, all right, because that's the
Anything.
only one I know how to play. Yeah, so
I mean, it's everything from, you know, the newfangled PlayStation 5 stuff to board games, to tabletop games, to pretty much anything pastime. So it's a non, you know, so many LGBT groups, support groups typically are very heavy. It's, you know, about HIV awareness or prevention or cures or you know, it's the HRC talking about transphobia and things like that. So this is something
very lighthearted kind of.
It's lighthearted, but it's also non-bar related. So it's something that doesn't necessarily have to be done, you know, when we are able to go back into real-time meetings.
Sure.
It's a non-bar related thing that really all ages, an 18-year-old adult gay male could participate and not feel like they're excluded, because as you know, Christian, so many things in our community are related around drinking, watching drag shows at bars, and are very in a certain way kind of exclusionary, especially for people that are shy and very introverted. But typically those people also love gaming, you know, and so it's been always kind of their refuge when they were younger. And so this is a great service. It's a free club to join, so there's no cost, there's no dues. We have sponsors for it, and it's just a good time.
Well, that sounds good. I mean, but it will never replace our beer pong tournament. Annual beer pong tournament that you and I, just in case no one remembers that, Jenny and I actually won we were very competitive in the beer pong sideline sports bar tournament. I think we came in second or third place. We were,
we made it all the way to the finale.
We were very well. So, okay, with that said, today's topic is it's spring. So we're going to be spring cleaning, and it's spring clean Latinx hate. And the topic is transphobia. We'll be talking about transphobia and maybe some history behind not only transphobia, but maybe educating people on the transgender community and neighbors within our neighborhoods and so forth. And but before we do that, we need to salute to coffee and pan dulce. So if you have your cup of coffee or whatever you're drinking this morning, Mama Ruth, tequila and I don't know, mimosas or something, salute to coffee and pan dulce. Also want to thank our pan dulce sponsor, Manolo's Bakery on Central Avenue. These are my new favorite ones, these cookies with little sprinkles, chocolate sprinkles on them. They have all kinds of sprinkles. On Central Avenue, please support your Black and brown business, small businesses, or any small business during our global pandemic. So just want to let you guys know, I am actually getting my vaccination shot tomorrow. I'm so excited. I believe Group 4 opens up today in North Carolina. If you're part of Group 4, you can start, or you can just go across the border in South Carolina and get it, anybody. And just for those who don't know, the vaccination shots are actually a federal program, so you don't have to get them in your own county. You can go anywhere around the United States and get them. So if you want to go all the way to Alaska, anybody can get them in Alaska. You know, but each state.
Did anybody heard on the news where there's a chart that you fill out when you're making the appointment to see if you qualify for the shot? At this point, actually overweight and obese people, depending on your weight and height, you can schedule already for your
pre-existing conditions, or what do you call it, Stephen?
High risk
comorbidity. That word that he taught us almost a year ago, comorbidities. So
Dr. B also helped with that education process.
That's true. So, you know, there are I tried to get it through Atrium and then Novant, but it was so complicated. So I just
Where
went
are
to
you
the
getting
county.
it with?
The county website. I went to the county website. I guess it's Star Med. They have a clinic that's happening. There's one at Bojangles and another place, and I was able to get in. And so I'm just I'm happy, but I hope everyone who is able to get the vaccination gets the vaccination. So I kind of digress there, but let's talk about this very important topic, transphobia. So I guess maybe we should define what transphobia is, first of all, and then maybe we can talk about what we know about transgender or transphobia. I, as a gay male, growing up, I had a lot of misconceptions or misinformation because in the LGBT community, the gays, or as Jenny kind of talked about, there's a lot of misconceptions that I had. And I think Jenny and I have had these conversations when we first met about if I was a little bit miseducated and confused about what is what and so forth, I'm sure other individuals are. I'm not saying.
Imagine if you're part of the group was misinformed. Imagine the first time I met Jenny, I remember clearly, I mentioned to her, please educate me, because I was under the impression of different stuff about transgender, the difference between being gay, lesbian, and trans. I've learned so much in that couple of minutes with her. And now, throughout this time that we've been in our show and the stuff, I've learned more and I've educated myself better.
So Jenny, would you mind starting off and maybe giving us an education lesson? I guess I don't know how to word that. Right? I mean,
I guess the best way.
Maybe not education, but a clarity.
Yes.
Maybe something to kind of take off that taboo, especially in our Latino community.
Yes.
I think a lot of, first of all, transphobia is just basically any kind of verbal hate or derogatory or physical actions such as assault or murder, but even something is innocuous is saying trans women aren't real women or trans men aren't real men. Derogatory terms, slurs. There's just, an awful, even prejudice in the medical community, doctors and nurses refusing to treat us medically if we go to the emergency room. There's actually some states that have tried to pass laws that doctors actually have the right to refuse a service, which is transphobia by the state. It's just insane, that would even be put up in a Congress. But we're battling transphobia right now in over 30 states where they are trying to either ban transgender athletes, specifically trans girls. It's really not about the trans men because people often forget that side of the binary. But right now they're either trying to ban them from sports or make it illegal for a doctor or a psychologist to treat transgender children. And there's so many misunderstandings, of the LGBT community. So, lesbian and gay, for example, is about their sexual identity. That's who they identify as. Mine's about my gender, so it has nothing to do with my sexuality. The only way that it affects my sexuality is if I present female, because that's how I identify, and I'm currently dating a woman, that it would obviously make me a lesbian. If I'm dating a man, technically I'd be straight. And so I think a lot of people get that confused because they go, "What, you're switching genders?" And I go, "No, I'm not switching genders. I was always a woman. So I was born a woman. My brain is wired to be female. So identity has always been female. My gender expression for most of my life was male. So I showed in a gender expression of actually being masculine or male, honestly, just to fit in, the fear, the fear, the pushback you get when you come out. It's an awful experience. Not to mention for some of us that do choose to do hormones, surgeries, all the accoutrement to make our body align with our brain, not only to fit society's expectations of what a woman should look like, but also to fit my own expectations. When I look in the mirror, I see Jenny, I don't see the former self, which, you know, we can talk about gender dysphoria, which is really when you look in the mirror and you don't see who you want to be. And it's a horrific, I explain to people, especially before I transitioned, it was like waking up and wanting to die. It's one of the worst hells that anybody can ever go through. And I did it for decades. It's really like feeling like a match is lit next to my brain every day. And it's physical, it's spiritual, it's mental, it is destructive. And for many of us, it's one of the reasons why we have the highest socioeconomic rates of suicide. Like, we're the highest class, well over 40%, really closer to 50%, is because of, and a lot of it has to do with transphobia and the hate and just the exhausting amount of questions. And a lot of us can't handle that, and for a good reason. You know, cis women and cis men never get questioned. Nobody would ever come up to Mama Ruth and go, when did you get your boobs done? You know, when asking basic questions, do you have a vagina or a penis? You know, it like, you know, just these invasive questions, these awful questions. Instead of worrying about my body parts, they should worry about everybody's a human. Like, just like a lot of people in Latinx community get judged by the color of their skin, the pigment of their skin, you know, and it's what aligns the trans community being visible, especially us that are visibly genderqueer, with the Black and brown communities, and it's because we're visibly different. When we walk in a room, people can differentiate us, you know, from, you know, whatever the norm is supposed to be. And a lot of people get pushback, you know, like Christian says all the time, I didn't know I was Latinx till I moved to North Carolina, you know, and felt that first, you know, xenophobic pushback that he'd never experienced before in his career. And no matter where I live, that's what I experience every day since I've been out of the closet and I'm transitioning. So it's a daily burden. I always say a little small meditation before I leave my house, because there's a good probability sometime in my life I'm not going to get to come back. And that's my reality.
When you say you're not going to be able to come back, you walk out of your door in fear, correct? Where you think that you might be assaulted or
Murdered.
killed, murdered.
Yeah.
I was reading right now transphobia on, you know, I looked it up and stuff because when you mentioned, see, I was under the impression of having phobia. To me, phobia, it's like having fear to see something. That's what I thought it was my mentality. When I start reading it, you are, you know, you're expressing it. Of course, you really expressed it or explained it very clearly. It's having a collection of ideas of phenomena that encompass a range of negative attitudes towards feelings and actions towards transgender people. So that means, you know, having hate. We have to do something about this because, you know, this is, it's not saying hate physically, like in the word there, but this is what a lot of people are, their actions are reflecting. Hating a human being, a heart beating for no reason. To me, it's no reason. I mean, it's a heartbeat. It's another living life. And we have to put a stop on that. We
Well,
can
especially
hating people.
Especially in what I call religious communities of faith that are quote unquote pro-life. But then if you go to their church and you're transgender or gay, for example, and they look at you like they'd rather kill you than have you attend their church, for example, communities of faith is probably one of the most strongest transphobic in general. Now I'm saying in general, where a lot of the hate is coming from, such as the Westboro Baptist Church in Kansas, for example, that has gone and like they were going to go protest the funerals of the people that died at the Pulse nightclub, for example. They do transphobic marches all the time. They're always attacking not just the trans community, but the LGBT community.
Yeah, they protested military funerals because
absolutely.
Because the military was accepting LGBT people, so they
They
decided to
still do.
protest. Yeah, it was like, yeah.
So in the military was one of the first major employers. In fact, it's the largest employer of transgender people, single employer. Over 14,000 strong serve our military currently right now. And so what are the things that everybody can do is work in your own communities, whether it is your own ethnic community, whether it's if you participate in any politics, social work, houses of worship. That's where it starts. I mean, especially for the Black and Brown communities. The majority of the people, so we have two bookend events every year. One's called TDOV, Transgender Day of Visibility, which is actually this month. It's actually in 2 weeks from today. It's on March 31st. Transcend Charlotte and Charlotte Pride are hosting the event. You can find it on Facebook and Instagram. Then we have it's more of a Transgender Day of Visibility is more of a celebration of life. It's kind of a spring event. It's kind of just showcasing our community on the positive side. Now TDOR, and it's spelled TDOR, is Transgender Day of Remembrance. It's every November 20th.
Yep.
It is a commemoration of everybody that was murdered because they were trans during the year, and it's a worldwide thing. It's celebrated in not celebrated, it's memorialized in over 90 countries. Sadly, the majority of the trans people that are killed, the majority of them are women of color. And it's heavily dominated by Latin American and South American countries. Brazil, Mexico always top the list. And so it's one of the reasons that we're talking about Latinx transphobia is because, every year that we do the names list, the majority of the time, like 75% of the names come from Brazil and Mexico, which is horrific. And even on the American list, it's usually predominantly, I'm going to say over 90% of the people on the list are usually from the Latinx community or the African American community. So they're women of color, and there's a lot of reasons why. If you look at the African American and the Latinx communities, they are usually rooted in religion. They're usually heavy communities of faith. If you look at all the celebrations that a lot of Latinx families do, it's like quinceañeras and all the things. The Battle of the Flowers parade is kind of rooted in San Antonio, is kind of rooted in different things, which is great. The issue has been is that traditionally a lot of churches, and we just saw homophobia come from the Pope this week, and a lot of it is, we have pastors and people that are using a bully pulpit to speak out against the LGBT community. When I testified against the bathroom bill in Texas, for example, in 2017, almost everybody that testified for it to ban us from the bathroom of our choice was from a church. It was all pastors. They didn't call any medical experts. They didn't call any police, anything. Like, it was about 40 people, and every one of them was a community of faith.
Yeah.
On the other side, we called the Dallas police chief, the state police chief, the state chamber of commerce president. All of ours were like business experts, law enforcement, and medical, plus people in the trans community, including myself. About 400 of us testified against our bathroom bill in Texas, and about 40, and they almost all came from like Dripping Springs, Texas, and places like that. And those were all anecdotal stories. They were just all saying, "Well, it's against our faith. It's against this. It's against that." But they had no incidents. They had no reason to hate us, and there's no reason to hate us. But we have to call it like it is.
Yeah.
The biggest pushback against
You
comes from
understand
religious
now as a
organizations.
human, you understand as a human being, as a creation of an almighty, that there's a big difference between religion and who God is. God loves you
Correct.
just the way you are.
Now, and see, that's why I always clarify, a community of faith or a person of faith does not have to embrace hate.
Correct.
In fact, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
You should love thy neighbor, and
Correct.
no matter what. Yeah, and unfortunately, not everybody has real faith.
But remember, in the
embrace
Bible, there was
religion.
Pharisees, and Pharisees hated even, Jesus while he was on earth. So we got to understand, and it's hard to change those type of religions mentality. And I grew up in Texas. I know what religion is. I mean, I was not allowed to wear pants. I was not allowed to wear makeup. I was not allowed to wear earrings. I was not allowed to go to the movies because I was going to hell. And they would tell me in my face. I've walked into churches where I have to sit in one side as a woman and the man has to sit in another. And I'm like, heck no. My husband sits with me, and I almost got kicked out because I get rebel about it.
So can you imagine how they deal with trans people then?
Now I'm
gay
kind of
men.
getting a piece of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I want you to understand something, Jenny. And here I am. As I love God, I love you. I understand that, and I feel miserable for those type of religious people, because I bet 100% that God is not agreeing with that. God loves you just the way you are. He created you. He blow breath into your heart, and he keeps you alive for a reason. You've been helping a lot of other people, even though you probably feel depressed sometimes and hurt and everything and betrayed, and you don't want to be walking out or around people because you think they're going to reject you. He doesn't reject you. He takes care of you every single night, and he's there with you. Just worry about that, and worry about everyone around here that loves you and care for you and accepts you just the way you are.
Well, and I appreciate all that, but addressing the transphobia, we have to put
put a
and
stop to that.
And especially even in your own communities of faith that several of us participate with, is making sure that we are aware of it, aware of people in the Latinx community that are hurting, that are trans, non-binary, trans women, trans men, because that's where it starts. It starts.
And you got to keep in mind, in Latinos, it's not only trans. People with tattoos.
Yep.
Prostitutes that walk into a church with a hoochie mama dressing code. You know what I'm saying? With short hair.
But I think that the marked delineation is that these same churches aren't going to Congress and trying to outlaw a tattooed existence. So, I mean, there is some similarities, but you choose to put a tattoo or earrings or whatever. At the end of the day, it's not who you were born as. Yeah. Whereas being transgender and non-binary, I'm born as that. I will die as that. Whether I choose to transition or show my gender expression, that's up to me. I chose to finally start to transition, but
see, people doesn't know the battle that is inside of you, what you went through. People only see you on the outside. They don't know what you went through on your transgender process. You know what I'm saying? There's always been a battle inside of you. course, you didn't want to be who you are,
Mm.
but now you have to learn how to accept it and kind of work at it and kind of adapt to it, and then, you know, release it now and, you know, walk on it.
Well,
And that's the
I
big
would- I
difference.
do-
And people need to get
I do
educated
want to
about that.
clarify one thing that you said that was wrong. I do want to be who I am. I do want to be Jenny. Society, in some circles, don't want me to be Jenny, and that's the difference. And there lies the rub.
No,
I'm
no,
very
I didn't
proud.
say it. I didn't say it.
Yeah, no, I
No,
know
I
what
didn't
you
say
said.
it for right now. But I mean, while you were growing up, I bet it was kind of confusing because you didn't know how you felt
Well, yeah,
at
well,
first.
it's confusing because, you know, considering the era that I grew up in, we didn't have the Google machine and and all the tools that young transgender, I call them little eggs, you know, that are 14 or 15 right now, that are going through that first puberty, that painful puberty, and it's not aligning with their brain, and it's a living hell. You know, I didn't really, I always knew I was a girl since I was about 5 or 6 years old, but I didn't really. It was way worse once the puberty kicked in and the hormones, and I'm just like, this does not feel right. I feel awful. And you know, nowadays parents are so much more educated. There is so many more tools than what I had. And so if I was young now, if I was a kid now, you have so many more weapons to fight back. And you know, we just saw a testimony in Missouri. You know, there was a dad, and he's actually an attorney, and he was testifying about his transgender daughter, and just the beautiful story, the beautiful story. And I can't even, you know, long story short, he even misunderstood it and resisted it until he finally realized he was killing his daughter. And there's this dad begging the state of Missouri not to ban her from girl sports. And that's the kind of thing we face, and that happened this week. This is not something that happened 10 years ago or 20 years.
Yeah.
This battle is happening right now.
Hey,
Go ahead.
Jenny, because we only have like maybe 30 minutes left, but
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious if you're open for us to ask you questions just that we have, and mainly because you're on today and you've educated me a lot. And I know you are not the Wikipedia for the transgender community or so forth, but you do have a lot of knowledge and experience. And I've kind of got some basic questions as a gay male, which is just for me, within our LGBTQ community, quite honestly, I learned very early on that it's the G's that really worry about the G's only. And the L's just worry about the L's only. And the B's, I never really understood the B's, but that's just me. That's me. And
There's a problem there too, but that's a different story.
No, that's true. That is true. And then I guess when, you know, I shared this with you before, as I matured as a gay male, I did not really understand the difference between a drag queen and a transgender person, or, you know, and, you know, I in my young days, I would, you know, we would be out somewhere and I would see someone walk in and I just assumed that was a drag queen. I didn't know the difference between a drag queen and a transgender person or whatever. So educate us what the difference is between a drag queen and a transgender individual.
Well, first of all, a drag performer, and it could be a drag queen or a king,
Yes.
is basically, it's a job. It's a performance art. It's they get up there and sing and dance and throw, you know, flaming batons and all kinds of stuff. It's very similar to a burlesque performance. It's usually set to music. It's usually lip syncing. It's usually outrageous costumes, outrageous makeup. But at the end of the day, the majority of the performers are still cisgendered. It's typically the majority of the the performers usually are what they call drag queens, which is usually cis gay males dressing up in drag, and they were doing a performance. But during their daily life, usually they have day jobs, they're whoever their regular identity is. It has nothing to do with their gender identity for the most part. Now, there are some trans women that do drag. There's been some on RuPaul's, Drag Race, which is the most famous of all the shows. A lot of them started their transition maybe during that those performances. A lot of them transitioned afterwards, if they were really, really young. But at the end of the day, a drag queen is not a trans woman, and a drag king is not a trans man. But I also think it's a generational thing. I think you look at Gen X people, and typically it's not part of their gender expression, but you're seeing the younger millennial and even the Z's. There's a lot more trans performers in the drag community, especially trans men. I see a lot of trans men and non-binaries performing drag art, and even fluctuating their drag persona, like between male and female, and all these, really cool plays with makeup and all that, and costuming. So, but again, at the end of the day, drag performance or burlesque performance does not indicate their gender identity. It's a job like banking or acting or whatever. So they get paid to do that.
Yeah.
I wake up and go to bed every day as Jenny. So this is not a performance. This is who I am. Now, I do wear outrageous clothes, but it just is just something that I enjoy doing. But that's the delineation right there. So
okay, well, Stephen, I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
I got a few questions. So I know that when we're talking about these sorts of issues that could be controversial in some circles, it's really easy to crap on religious communities and talk about the negative things, right? That's just a super easy thing, right? But what is, I think, more interesting is talking about the opportunities for finding inclusive spaces. So, for example, in Charlotte, we have, I've driven around, I've seen a number of churches, for example, that have rainbow flags out front. They have, an active sort of process of finding people who may feel marginalized and say, come as you are, we welcome all people. I know the Universalist Church does that too in some ways, right? So there are like traditional churches that have been around for a long time, like the Catholic Church, which, even when the Pope in 2020 says he supports civil unions, as far as like a thing in the Western world, it causes a big ruckus within the church because it borderlines on heresy. Like, that's a thing for Catholics. But if you are not part of that community, you can go to any of these other churches and, find that kind of religious community. There's also more secular communities, like the gaming community that we were talking about earlier, right?
Correct.
Finding inclusive spaces. There are many pride organizations around, around the country that you can find right here in North Carolina. Pride, GLAAD. There's probably another one that I'm missing out on.
Oh, there's a lot of organizations and by no means am I anti-communities of faith. In fact, both here in Charlotte and a lot in Texas. In Texas, I was part of a group called OAC, Open and Affirming Congregations, and we did education in religious-based organizations, specifically churches, synagogues, whoever will invite us. And it was in Amarillo, Texas, which was an ultra conservative part of the world. We started with two churches, the UU and the Universalist, the one you just mentioned, and MCC, which is Metropolitan Community Church, which is a nationwide network of churches. It was started by a gay male in San Diego, California in the 1960s. And we grew in just 2 years that I was involved with Open and Affirming in Amarillo. We went from 2 campuses to 8 churches. And so now there is a ton of LGBT open and affirming congregations here in Charlotte. In fact, when we had real time, when we could have Pride in person, the last one in 2019, I believe we had either 12 or 15 religious organizations at Pride
that
with
was one of the
booths.
things that I was very surprised about the first time I attended Pride, quite
We
by
also have
accident, actually, because I didn't realize there were going to
political
be so
parties there
many
too.
churches there.
Yeah, we also had political organizations, activist organizations. So the Libertarian Party had a booth there.
Yeah, we've had a booth there every year for the past 3 years. Well,
the Greens were there.
COVID, but you know.
Yeah. Nobody had a booth there last year.
Yeah, it's really sad. I was actually really looking forward to it.
We had the Greens, the Libertarians, and the Democrats all had booths there. And in fact, I believe all three parties maybe marched in the parade, I believe. And so we have a lot of politicians that march in the parade. We have a lot of people from different communities. And in general, there's a lot of communities of faith that support the LGBT community. Because if you go to prides all over the country, you'll see churches marching in the parade and being supported.
Hey, Jenny.
So there's this weird dichotomy.
Yeah. Hey, Jenny, I have a question, and maybe it's more of a comment, but I just find it, as a gay male, what I have noticed in Charlotte, but maybe not just here, North Carolina, and maybe in other states as well, that Democrats, you just assume the Democratic Party supports all of the LGBTQ. They don't. No. They support the G's a lot. The G's are supported a lot. That is something that is so obvious in Charlotte. And I have always said, if it's a gay white male issue, it'll happen in a week at City Council. If it's any other issue, let's do a committee. Well,
and that therein lies that what you just said, therein lies part of the problem is, and I think that's why you see so many Latinx and Black transgender women murdered, is really because there's a hierarchy, and cis men, whether they're gay, whether they're straight, just outrank us. I mean, there's a lot of white gay males in the Republican Party too, which is a whole different show. But we saw it when the Republican National Committee was here, the RNC was here, and we had a white gay male out there holding a Trump sign, fighting
the other Trump person.
With the other Trump person on video. And it was a Trumpster versus a Trumpster, and two white men, one gay, one straight, or at least, we assume he's straight.
Yeah.
And that's why the trans community gets left out of so many different things, is because if it's a male issue, and this is not just trans community, but cis women too. Like we see cis white males making policy decisions for women's reproductive rights. We see
Jenny, explain to our viewers what cis means.
A cis means that your brain aligns with your plumbing. So whatever you, or genitalia or whatever, I choose to call it plumbing, indoor plumbing or outdoor plumbing. Genitalia has got such a connotation, and
so that's also, here's a question. Why do we use why is the term cis used instead of heterosexual or straight?
Well, because that's a sexuality term. So it's a sexual identity. So cis is actually a medical term. Trans is too. So transgender means that basically my brain and my plumbing is kind of perpendicular to each other. Like they're not lined up, and like yours and Stephen's and Mama Ruth's gender identity and your plumbing line up together, so they go parallel together. They match.
So Christian,
and so cisgender actually delineates that.
Yeah. So Christian, for example, you and I are both cis, even though I'm straight and you're gay. So our gender identity is the same, you and I, Christian, but
Okay.
our sexual orientation is different.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what maybe, hate to add that, but I mean, there's just so, now granted, it's a generational thing. Gen Xers and probably older, or maybe boomers, or maybe more advanced than Gen Xers. And we talked about before the show, we can do a whole show about Gen Xers and somehow clueless we are about certain things. But, you know, I mean, it's just, we tend to fall back to, oh, that's just so complicated. Why do they have to make it so complicated? Why can't they just be a man?
Millennials are really tuned into it.
Yes, exactly. Millennials this is just a no-brainer kind of thing. And with us, if it gets too complicated, the Gen Xers are like they just want it very simple. You know, we're not a very smart, I don't want to say that.
But
We're the ones who
here's
invented.
the thing.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I'll stop you there.
Sure.
Like, then why do and you say this all the time. You sometimes, I think you even have a button that says believe women. So when I tell you that I'm a woman, whether I'm trans or cis, why don't you believe me?
No, that is exactly.
That's it.
No.
That should stop right there. Is
exactly.
when I tell you my pronouns are she,
Yes.
her, and we had this issue with Richard when he was on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And he insisted on keep using male pronouns.
Yep.
And I had to correct him multiple times, so I finally had to just blow up on him and say, stop misgendering me. Why do you have to assign my pronouns? They're my pronouns.
Yeah.
If I tell you that my name is Jenny and not Bob, but it's Jenny, don't keep calling me Bob. Okay, you know, believe me when I say my name is Jenny and my pronouns are she, her, and there is the issue. It's not complicated. That is, and I know what you're saying, Christian. You're okay with it, but I have a lot of people who say it's so complicated. I'm going, what's complicated? I just told you my pronouns and my name. In fact, I started the show that way. It's up on the screen that way. So just believe me. Just knock off your prejudice and your bigotry, and just, that's how I can clock a bigot, is when they keep fighting with me, keep trying to misgender me. Is like, okay, you are assigning my gender and you're not. That I'm not going to keep calling you. I'm not going to keep talking to Christian and Steve and keep calling them she. Like, I'm not going to sit here and go, hey Steven, you know, hey, what's up, girl? You know, like,
I mean, you can. That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it
yes,
is
Queen
when you don't
Slay.
have gender. When you don't have gender dysphoria.
That's what really gets me confused, because I would like to know what's the difference between both of y'all. Like, Chris describes himself, you know, I know Chris was born a male and everything, but he decided to be a gay. So he's gay. But then Jenny, I'm not going to question your name. You're a she and that's it. Welcome to my world. But you're trans. So how do I kind of, and I'm not talking about me, I understand y'all now, but for my audience out there, how can we combine this together and understand that, you know, it doesn't matter what, you know, even though y'all are different in your way of thinking or choosing, you know, y'all still fit in my world.
Well, I mean, the difference is the easiest way to explain this: being transgender is who I wake up as every morning.
Okay.
Being gay is who Christian goes to bed with at night.
He chooses to.
And so yeah, well, I mean, he's wired that way. His brain is wired that way. It's not a choice. I mean, being gay is not a choice, and being trans is not a choice.
Although I will say I have chosen some really good people to date. So I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But we're born that way. But one is like, so Mama Ruth, when did you choose to be straight? When did you decide I'm going to be straight? When did you come out as straight?
Or is that something you've always been?
No.
To be honest, let me tell you, because we all go through it during puberty. Puberty. I actually I was encountered by a lesbian girl in a bathroom at the age of I would say 12, 13. And that's when I realized that that was not my choice.
Right.
That wasn't
So
me.
it's not who you are.
That wasn't me.
Yeah.
And I
So-
respect that. I still keep in touch with them, but that's not who I wanted to be.
So you never chose to be straight. That's just who you are.
Okay.
You see?
So that's-
You see, I mean, like you
I get
were
it.
approached a proposition by somebody of the same gender, but you knew right away that was not you.
Yeah.
So that means you're hardwired that way. So Christian's hardwired the way he is. I'm hardwired. Implying that there's a choice diminishes who we are, just like it would the same way you don't have to come out as straight because that's the norm. And this is where a lot of homophobia and transphobia is, because a lot of people say, well, just be normal. Just put on boy clothes,
Well,
scrape
tell 'em
off the
I
makeup.
am normal. You be normal.
And I'm going, first of all, normal people are usually boring, and I don't even know what normal is.
Yeah.
I mean, because we got 4 people on this screen,
And you know,
and
speaking to the
Stephen
issue
is
of
the weirdest
normal-
one of us all.
Oh,
Yes,
cool.
I
Yeah.
agree on
But-
that.
Speaking to the issue of normal, this is an interesting anecdote that might be useful to the audience. So, you know, in my mind, normal is just typical, right? Normal and typical mean the same thing in my mind for you know a very long time, and even right now, right? And so there was an occasion where I was speaking with somebody, and I was talking about someone in their life who had a disability, right? And I used the word normal in the conversation to differentiate them from like what is typical. And they said, hold on a second, Steve, try using the word typical instead of normal. And I said, okay, well, they mean the same, but like, and I asked, so like, why typical instead of normal? And they said, because when people hear normal, they think the opposite of it is abnormal, and abnormal has a negative connotation in most people's mind, whereas typical and atypical are kind of neutral, right? So there's a way that there's a weight to words that some people in some communities have that others don't. And so one of the things that you can do is, one, try to be mindful of the language that you use, right? So to talk about the jerk guy that you were talking about before who kept misgendering you, right? If you are part of like the conservative community and you have this foible about pronouns, guess what? I almost never use pronouns in conversations, like with people face to face. Like there is no time I can think of where I'm going to be talking to Jenny and I'm going to be using he and she or any of the gendered pronouns in conversation. I'm going to say Jenny, or if I'm talking about like in the third person, there's a third person pronoun, they, which covers everybody. It's super easy and you don't have to mess with language. So even if you're one of those conservative individuals, you can make that active step. And I will say this, by taking those active steps of thoughtfulness toward what maybe someone else is feeling, you will be able to better understand the humanity of people who maybe are in different communities from yourself. And in that way, you kind of expand your own mind and your own, viewpoint of the world. It's a growth exercise, and growth is good for everybody. And I say this because, as a member of the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian community, we're big tents. We got all kinds of people that you deal with all the time from all different walks of life. People who are, completely anti-religious to very devout Christians of one stripe or another, people who are super straight or super gay, people who are, trans and not, and it's just the whole gamut of humanity, right? And so you have to be from all different parts of the country, from all different walks of life, even all different parts of the world. And so you have to be a good communicator. You have to be able to say, ooh, what words am I using? How am I best effectively to communicate? And when somebody else, let's say you're on the receiving end of that, when somebody else miscommunicates, they misstate something like I did, right? When I said normal instead of typical, rather than being attacked, the other person was gracious enough to take that opportunity and say, oh, let me educate you on something that you just don't understand because because it's not in your world, right? So like, I'll tell you that the first time I met a gay person that I knew was gay was in college. Like where I grew up in the very rural area of upstate New York, right? Town of 500 people, like I knew gay existed, right? Like I had seen it on TV, like there's a show called Will and Grace. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's something that people in New York City do, right? But then I'm like, I met someone who was gay in college and was their friend, and I was like, oh, okay. And at the time, my mindset was, yeah, I think it's a little weird, but whatever, it doesn't affect me. It is what it is. And then that was that. And then over time, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, it's just like how we're wired. And you have to like sort of like, sometimes you can just jump into the cold water of the pool and you're fine. But sometimes you got to tiptoe into it depending on how you were raised. And so having, grace about certain things really does help you in forming relationships, educating yourself, being able to educate others, and generally form and foster a better, more inclusive community, because everyone has something to contribute, right? And we want to have a friendly, good environment where everyone can feel like they can either be represented or participate or contribute in this great, experiment that we call, Charlotte, North Carolina, America. Like, we all have something. And to that end, like, things are getting better over time. And as we educate and talk and have these conversations more, I think it only gets better.
Well, and there is a huge difference. Like, I call it the difference between woeful and willful ignorance. And there is woeful ignorance that they've just never been educated, like the person, like your example of the disability conversation. That was woeful ignorance. You use terminology that has a connotation to it that is hurtful by accident.
Yeah.
You didn't mean to. You didn't go out.
There was no intent, right? I used words with good intent, not realizing that perhaps they could be taken in a bad way, right?
Correct.
Intent really mattered in that sense. And the other person was gracious enough not to immediately assume ill intent on my part. And they go, oh, he just doesn't know. Let me explain. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it.
And many people in our community, there's the intent and the connotation and the setting really decides my response. If I go through a drive-through through McDonald's and my voice is deeper than most cis women, a lot of times I get stirred, which it's a really funny thing. So when I pull around and they see me there, you can tell right away that there are a lot of people that are conscious of what they did. They're horrified because they look at me and they're like, oh, you're not a sir, and so it's most people don't intentionally hurt me or hurt people in my community. A lot of times it is just an accidental slippage. There is willful ignorance where they're intentionally misgendering me or trying to offend me. Those get dealt differently. Obviously, they get a different response at some point where somebody's habitually trying to go to response out of me, and I have to shut that down and just go, look, either we can't be in the same room or or something. There's gonna have to be.
You don't want to be around people who are going to be willfully disrespectful to you, right?
And it's hard in some settings, like in political settings and activist settings, where it's not the problem. I'm not getting to choose my date. I've been in some settings where I've had some people be pretty transphobic to me in public, and it's awful, and it's a horrific feeling. But I learned to roll with it. I learned how to either avoid those people and not have anything to do with them, and or even gracefully try to explain to them, and if they refuse to do it, then just explain to them how wrong they are, but not in a I'm going to curse you type way. Is just shut that conversation down, not really for them, but for the people around them, so that they can learn. And I've had that happen here in Charlotte at a caucus meeting where I had some pushback from certain people, and luckily not everybody there felt that way and actually took exception to it.
Hey, Jenny, you and Stephen touched on something that we want to talk about in April, and I thought it was kind of a good segue because we're going over just a little bit. And I want to thank everyone for their time, because this is an important topic, and it's important for us to hear about this topic, but many topics. Stephen had said a couple of weeks ago that he felt like racism, and correct me if I said this wrong, was like the lazy man's, what was it you used? It was like a person, it was something to that effect, that it's just, I'm paraphrasing, it's kind of easy to be a racist because you don't have, you're just lazy. I don't know if you said it like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a lazy mindset. You just use it to turn off your brain, and you just group people in a collective that you imagine, and it's lazy thinking.
Yes, and so and that was a very interesting statement you made, because I wanted to talk about next month about this new thing called cancel culture, and it's almost as if though some people are starting to use the term cancel culture as a lazy way of just being decent. They see when they are corrected or they are called out on something that's no longer decent to do, like being a bigot or being a racist or transphobic or whatever, their immediate thing is, oh, it's cancel culture, cancel culture. Now they're using that term because we haven't really had a comeback yet, because it's kind of a new term that's being used. So we really want to talk about that. But I do find that there are, and I don't want to just pinpoint the Republican Party, but they tend to have taken ownership of that statement, cancel culture, and so it seems to be that term cancel culture is the new lazy person's term. Used to be the racist person's term. Now it's the lazy person's term of having to deal with changes, or it's too complicated for them. And
which is hilarious, because conservatives and Republicans have been using cancel culture for quite a while. The irony is how many organizations have boycotted Disney because they had a gay character in a movie just a few years ago, and they've used cancel culture way more than the progressive or liberal or whatever side. But the moment we embrace it too, and the moment it's been effective, like, or semi-effective, it seems like all of a sudden, well, now that's politically correct and that's wrong, and we shouldn't be canceling people. I'm like, well, you guys have been canceling people for centuries in this country.
This is a fun conversation, because it's a topic I know a little bit about. And it's there's a lot of misconceptions about what cancel culture is and what it isn't, and what people on one side or other are trying to describe. I will say this: cancel culture against the powerful, not necessarily a bad thing. Cancel culture against the powerless and against the individual, almost always a bad thing.
Okay, right. Well, that's a show we're going to have in April, so I hope everyone comes back for that show. And so I just want to just give three comments real quickly, and then we probably should start to wrap up. The history of transgender, what's the term I should use, Jenny? Transgenderism, or the history of transgender individuals? I guess that's a better term.
I mean, there's been history of us recorded in so many different cultures. I think this is where you're going. Yes,
exactly.
I mean, you saw it in the pyramids in Central America. You saw gender diversity in many cultures, in Native American nations, across indigenous nations, across North and South America. You see it in the Torah. There's 6 different gender identities described in the Torah of the Jewish faith. And it goes on and on, Hindu culture. So ironically, a lot of the world's major religions had gender diversity in their teachings, including in the Mediterranean culture when Christ was walking the earth. In fact, one of the Roman emperors was actually an empress. She lived as a trans woman, ruled Rome for 9 years, and married a man. And so, we didn't just all of a sudden just pop up.
Well, that's
gender diversity is, and this is one of the things I try to explain to people, that if you truly are a person of faith, that you believe God's all powerful, And God made us so diverse in skin color and eye color and hair color and height and weight and all this beautiful diversity, but we only have 2 genders
Yeah.
and 1 sexuality.
Mhm.
And so that is such a bizarre,
Yep.
like I'm going, so you're limiting God's ability to create a gender diverse humanity.
So we
you're
almost
telling
can't.
me
So
that
we cancel
God can only
culture
create
God.
men, that we can only create men and women, and
Yep.
that's it. So
Well,
when I get
that's yeah.
with somebody that says, well, God made you a man, I'm going, yeah, no, God made me with a female brain too.
Yeah.
And if God created all the fishes in the sea and all this amazing universe, then you're the one putting limitations on God, not me,
Yeah.
but you.
Well,
Because
that's
God has the
yeah.
power to give me a female brain with outdoor plumbing. I mean,
Well,
like,
that's what's yeah. That's
mean,
what's
what-
Well, he only
what you're
created spirit. So we,
Yeah.
you know, to him, he doesn't see us as woman or men's. I don't know if y'all understand that, but I mean,
no.
he
I
as a child of his.
and
yeah,
that's
but the on the physical world, the body that we're holding right now, why is it such a, and I'm not just picking on religion,
Close-minded.
Closed-minded, that all of a sudden we can have all this diversity, but then it's a full stop on sexuality and gender identities. And I'm like, well, wow, wait a minute. Why can't people be that way? Why can't they love more than one gender? Why can't they love all 16? You know, why can't you be pansexual or bisexual? Why can't you be gay or lesbian? Why do you have to be this heterosexual person? Like, what to me, the narrow-mindedness, the closed-mindedness is what gets us in trouble. And as Stephen says, a lot of the language around it, the thought process is just so unbelievable. And I think that's where the homophobia and transphobia comes, is that they have some deep-seated fear that maybe they're trans or gay. I think a lot of it comes from there. I think a lot of it is their own internal chicanery and stuff like that. I didn't use the other word, but is a projection on their real problems. I think many homophobic and transphobic cis male conservatives usually are closeted about something themselves.
Yes.
And they have to take their bully pulpit again, because Stephen kind of alluded to it. When you cancel a culture that shouldn't be canceled, like the Latinx community that's received a lot of hate in the last 4 years, that all new arrivals from Central America are murderers and rapists and drug dealers and all that. And I'm going,
just this week that was said.
Yeah, I mean, the Central American peoples are beautiful people with beautiful history and amazing diversity. And just you know, the countries of El Salvador and Nicaragua and all those places are just amazing people. And to just tag them with that when there's no proof, that's the ugly side of cancel culture, and it's really rooted in bigotry and hate, just like with transgender people. So the parallels of people that are not typical to your normal, to what your life is used to, doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't mean they're evil. It doesn't mean they're criminal. And that's what we got to get away from, is trying to, well, they're not normal. I'm going, well, maybe in your world, but in my world, I'm used to being around LGBT people. So that's my normal, if you would have used that. And it's very typical of my day to talk to somebody in my community. And
well, I think what you said about the history is very important for us to understand, because as Americans, we have very short-term memories on purpose, so that way we don't have to educate ourselves,
right,
on the history of just things in general. I looked up the Aztecs, the Mayans, and the Incas empires, and they all embraced transgender. They're both men and women could hold positions of power in those empires, which was something that modern day it changed. In a lot of those empires, which were incredible empires, they embraced it. It was not a big, for them, it was, I don't know, but it seemed like it was not a big deal. It started to become a big deal when the Spanish and started to teach them religion, and they wanted certain things to be a certain way. And so, I do think that to Stephen's point, and I just like the way you said that when you said it, Stephen. It's like a lot of these hates and phobias and things like that it's just a lazy person's way of dealing with things. It's so much easier to say, I hate so-and-so, instead of finding out, educating the person, educating yourself on what the situation is or whatever. And so I just seen within our Latinx community, for those who may be practicing transphobia, willfully or willingly, the two terms you use, we have to remind, it really is a lazy person's way of dealing with things. Because it takes extra time to educate yourself on transgender, the struggles that they go through. Within our LGBT community, it is a lazy gay person's way of dealing with it by just going, I don't know if it's a drag queen.
Honestly, with the Google machine,
yeah,
these days, you can go on Glad's website, glaad.com, and they have one page. You can read one page. Everybody can do this.
Yep.
And it has, I don't even know how many ways to be a transgender ally.
Yeah.
Go on there, read that page. It'll take you maybe 3 to 5 minutes.
Yep.
And you can understand how to be an ally to the transgender community. And so nobody has an excuse. And even lazy people have 3 to 5 minutes. So instead of sitting there watching YouTube videos all day, just take 3 to 5 minutes to go on Glad's website, read on how to be a transgender ally. And I know several other organizations have that too, or even Google how to be an ally to the transgender community. And you'll see all kinds of things pop up. Spend 3 or 5 minutes just learning that. And it's a great way to immerse yourself. You don't have to understand the mechanics of my transition. You don't have to do, like, all you have to do is figure out, hey, she's a person too. That's it. That's all we got to say. And like Stephen said, I don't even have to use pronouns. I just call her Jenny. That's simple too. Like, if you just want to call me by my first name, that's cool. If you call me by my first name, we're friends already. And it can be that simple and that transformative. And people shouldn't hate communities. Go ahead.
Let me give a plug, because GLAAD is a great organization for a lot of folks. The Libertarian Party has its own organization called Outright Libertarians. So, if you want another, it's like a political party outreach program. And some of my friends are actually the people who help create this organization and push its activism out there. So if you go to Outright USA, that's outrightUSA.com, and I'll put a link of it. They just redid their page. It looks great. And it is like our parties, our movements, communities, outreach to people in this atypical, if you want to use that term, community. But these are folks who are Americans who have something to contribute, who are beautiful people, who have a lived experience that maybe is a little different from what is, more common, and they are people who deserve the respect that anyone is afforded. They have something to contribute. They have a valuable set of experiences that add to the diversity of thought in any conversation. And here's the thing. One of the things that is incumbent upon us as people who are, let's say, advocates for communities like this, right? We're going to encounter people who it may seem like they're going to have lazy thinking, but what may actually be happening is they're experiencing something called cognitive dissonance, right? And most people cannot deal with that, right? They have a preconceived way the world is. And then when they encounter information that countermands that, something happens in their brain and it causes discomfort. And very few people without training can overcome that. And they just go, they go back, they're like, oh, I don't like this because doing something in my mind, the way I thought the world was isn't how it is. And so a lot of times you're going to encounter that. And so when you encounter somebody who is by all accounts a good person, but maybe they have like that little bit of, like, you might say, lazy thinking or bigotry, they may be actually experiencing cognitive dissonance. And people who don't know how to deal with that, they just go, oh, I'm going to go away from it, like, touching a hot stove. you have to work with them over time so that they can overcome it. And in that sense, being able to do that helps grow them as a person. It can be an opportunity. And this is for the community, like just something that I've experienced and I've seen. It can be an opportunity to not only help them grow, but you can grow in your own understanding of your own issues and your own advocacy.
Sure.
And, you form a bond, a greater community overall.
Sure.
Well, and I think that's why one of the reasons why we do Pride events is it's because not everybody that attends Pride, especially in what I call the straight cisgendered community, you'll see these, married straight couples and a lot that are coming with their kids and stuff. And I've seen it a lot of times where one of them really wants to come to the Pride event, but one of them kind of does, but they're more of the draggy instead of the dragger. But after a while, and I can't tell you how many straight people have come up to me and go, I went to Pride last year and I didn't really want to go, but my friends or my significant other wanted me to go. And they always say universally, I had a great time and it wasn't what I thought it would be. And I think it was that what I call the preconceived notion. And we talked about it in sales all the time. So my career, I sold a lot of big ticket items. And a lot of times when people in the first 5 minutes of the presentation would say no, I go, you don't even know what you're saying no to. So whatever preconceived notion you had to what I'm talking about, I'm not even 5 minutes in and you're already telling me no and packing up and ready to leave. And I'm going, at least listen to it with an open mind. I get no's all the time, but at least let me go through my entire presentation. And so at the end, if you still hate me and hate the product or it's not for you, that's fine. And I think, a lot of people, they've got this what you call a cognitive dissonance, and it comes from a preconceived notion that, I don't know, that hanging around trans people or gay people is going to turn them, or that it's going to change them. And that's why I correct people that say, well, it's a choice. It's not a choice. You're born that way, you're wired that way in your brain, because I think some of the fear is that they will be converted, like trans people and I've seen this on some posts on social media, like trans people are trying to turn more people into trans people. I'm going, no, you don't get turned this way. We don't have any kind of magical fairy dust to create trans and gay people. Well, I wish I had that kind of power. I wish I could give them the gabies and but it's not reality. And again, you're right on point, Stephen. A lot of people have this strange disconnect with very simple concepts because they just have not been socialized around the LGBT community. Maybe they grew up in a small town in upstate New York with 500 people and weren't exposed to it. I use this point, my mom's a baby boomer, and she did not see a person of color till she was 10 years old, because she grew up in a small North Texas town. It was a very segregated part of town. And so her grandmother took her to this flea market and there was African Americans there. And she was like, what is that? She'd never seen a Black person until she was 10. And so I think of it that way. When people meet me for the first time, they've never actually met or know of or even know what a trans person is. I get that same look, like, what are you? They're not mad. They're not saying it as a mean term.
Yeah, it may be that you're the first person from that community they've ever met, in which case you have to be like an ambassador for your community,
which is both a gift and a burden.
It is.
But it's something I do. In fact, that's why I go to so many different functions that are outside of my Pride wheelhouse. I joined National Organization of Women and then became a board member for that very reason. I educate people just by my presence. Like Mama Ruth, I probably was the first trans person she really got to know, and she's come a long way. Because when we first met, she struggled a little bit. I could tell, like, And it wasn't because of hate or meanness. She has a very loving heart, a very beautiful mother's heart. It's just, I'm different than her circles, you know.
You're right.
And
You were the first one. I think I've never encountered or had any closeness than
yeah,
you. I mean, you're the. I mean, I've seen people. I known, but to have a close conversation and get to know you and get to kind of experience. I've seen you at a parking lot, and I'm like, hey, Jenny, you
yeah.
know, things like
And,
that that
and,
I didn't
and
know before.
and it was a growth experience for you. So then in your communities, that because you do so much advocacy in this community, which is just amazing, and you're a great public servant. And that way, when you encounter either transphobia from somebody in one of your circles, and or you run into a trans person that needs help, whether it is with the medical thing that you do or anything else, the great thing is you've become an ally for my community. And everybody can, they can get themselves educated. They don't have to know everything about being transgender to be an ally. All they got to do is open up their minds and hearts, get slightly educated, and just accept us for who we are. It doesn't change you. Like I'm not asking you to transition with me. I'm just asking you not to make it a big deal, and just
Let me,
take me in my word that I'm Jenny. That's it.
hey,
That's all you
hey,
need
hey,
to do.
hey, Jenny, we're going to need to wrap up, y'all,
Yeah.
because we've gone over. But you know, normally this is a show, and we want to keep the conversations to 30 seconds or less. But this was such an important topic that I felt like it needed to be a dialogue. And I appreciate if it doesn't move quickly like a show it normally would. I think this is such an important topic that it needed to be a dialogue, and we probably need to have many more times, dialogues like this. But I do think that one of the things that, and I keep saying, you know, what Stephen said and Jenny said and what Mama Ruth, but what Jenny said was something that I have tried to embrace probably since I've moved to Charlotte. I will admit that I've had a lot of implicit biasness and misogynistic views and so forth. And I use the lazy man's, oh, well, I grew up with all brothers, and, you know, I didn't have that many women around, you know, and I was raised by a single dad, you know, it's like, it doesn't mean you still can't be a decent person. I mean, you know, it's just like, that's like the lazy man's thing. But one of the things that Jenny said, and I actually learned this from white women, and during the Me Too movement, when women, and I knew this professionally as well, when someone tells you, and Jenny said this, when someone tells you who they are and how they feel, believe them. Why question, you know, and I find when people say, I feel discriminated against. No, you're not. No, you're not. I mean, it's like when someone's telling you, this is what I see, this is how I feel, don't, yeah, you can have questions. Well, tell me how you feel that way. Tell me this, but I do like what you said, Jenny, is I wish that we would teach our children and even those of us who are older, when someone is in front of your face telling you, if you're a woman, if you're a person of color or whatever, this is how I feel, believe them. You know, I mean, just your first instinct should be to believe them. And, you know, and so anyway, I just think that's a really interesting thing to say. And the reason I'm saying that is because of a very important Senate election in 2022 here in North Carolina, where Richard Burr is no longer going to be running. And so there's a whole host of candidates that are running. I find it should be completely unacceptable in 2022 as a Democrat to have a Democratic nominee that does not embrace all of the LGBTQ. And I don't want to name any individual, but we have an individual that's, well, yeah, we have an individual that's running that completely embraces the G's and the L's, but has not always been supportive of the T's, of the transgender community, whether it's about military, transgender in our military, whether it's about just basic things. And we also have people on our city council currently who don't truly embrace all of the LGBT, or we'd have the non-discrimination ordinance passed already. I mean, all of the other cities have passed their non-discrimination
Well,
ordinances,
that's a whole nother episode.
completely other episode. Completely
that
other
was-
episode.
That's
that-
Raleigh that made that not happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once that
But that has
moratorium,
sunsetted. That
Yeah.
sunsetted last December.
yes,
And
once
so
it
there's-
stopped,
You know, there are threats behind closed doors about, you know, hey, we're going to revoke the charter, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a
well,
lot,
actually,
of stepping on eggshells.
yeah. But Stephen,
there's-
other cities in North Carolina have already passed. They passed it like 2 weeks after.
yeah.
I mean, Raleigh,
Well,
other cities.
I will say, without going too far into it, because I'm actually involved with this.
Yeah.
For Mecklenburg County and the city of Charlotte. We didn't push it real hard here initially because we wanted to see what the other cities would do.
Mhm.
Plus, since the pushback with all the bathroom bills and stuff like that 4 or 5 years ago was really because of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County and the weight and the power and somewhat some of the in-state jealousy. So maybe we wanted to make sure other counties and cities adopted it first before we really pushed, so that we didn't get, as Stephen very astutely picked up, we don't need to be the first mover because we were kind of part of what was the pushback from the other side in 2016 and in 2015. So it was very strategic to not push real hard here first and make sure we test the water. So
Mhm.
I believe it's, and I might be wrong on these numbers, but I believe it's 10 or 12 different municipalities and counties have passed NDOs or non-discrimination ordinances. And it's not just about LGBT, but it's also about natural hair and other
Yes.
things as well. So it is basically it's passing something to let people just be like,
Yes.
like they should be able to work the way that.
So what I'm hearing
feel
is
most
now is the
comfortable.
time that the city council, this coming election season, needs to push this through. The people of Charlotte need to vote
Yes.
for candidates who support this, because now that we're no longer the tip of the
Mhm.
spear,
Yep.
we can point to other counties that have done this without any problems.
Right.
Our politicians, and let's face it, politicians are typically cowards, but now our politicians have an example to be like, oh, okay, here we go. And
Yep.
the people should, can, will
Yep.
demand that we have better policies from our leaders at the local level. That's why you should vote Libertarian, folks, because we're for all your rights all the time.
Well,
I knew that plug was coming. He was right on cue,
yes, of
as
course.
he should be.
And certificates of equipment, or I can't remember something. What is the other one, Stephen?
We need to get rid of those and
Yes.
because we need to hold government employees,
That's right.
including cops and judges, to
Yeah.
the same legal standards as everybody else.
Yeah.
Well,
We live in a rule of law society, right?
that's right. And so with that, we will close because we have gone way over. And I do appreciate everyone's time. And I do hope if you've watched this, you've learned something. And or at the least, you will take the time to just learn something, you know. And so, and I do want to say, I do want to say one thing before we go around the Brady Bunch screen. And I don't always, sometimes we don't always give each other the compliments that we need to. I don't really need them, but I'm just going to say, you know, as a person of faith, and I understand the hatred that has come from certain religions, and not necessarily all of the religions, but certain big religions. I grew up in Texas with the Southern Baptists, where they would smoke pot and get drunk and have sex on Saturday night and then judge us on Sunday mornings. You know, so there's always this joke about the Southern Baptist. And I've always wondered why they were so homophobic when they couldn't have choir directors without gay people in the Southern Baptist religion. And you know, so and within the Catholic Church, you know, I understand that we've gone through things and we had some hope with Pope Francis, and then we had a little downturn, but there's also some priests that are saying we're still gonna bless unions regardless of what the Pope says and so forth. But I do want to say that sometimes we don't always acknowledge the people of faith that practice what they preach. And Mama Ruth is one of those individuals that I want to say has always inspired me. She's a person of faith. I know how deeply she loves her faith. And it is because those of us who have been damaged by faith sometimes are skeptical of people who are a person of faith. So when we meet someone who's very about their faith, we always have skepticisms. And I've had that skepticism of Mama Ruth, but every time I've talked with her about something, the basis of her religion seems to be about love and God and this, and that is the faith that is truly inspiring. And so I want to thank you, Mama Ruth, because you truly are an ambassador of your faith. And when people hear you speak, it inspires people like me who maybe didn't have that all the time. And it's almost like the first time you see a church at a gay pride parade, you're like, oh my gosh, there are people who love Jesus and love God. And, and you just, it's just, so I want to thank you for continuing and doing that, because we don't always, there aren't always people who are ambassadors of their faith like you are. And I just wish there were more, more individuals. So thank you for
get to know who really God is and Jesus, and experience their love and their merciness, so we can have mercy and love for others.
With so I wanted to say that because I've heard you over the last 3 years, as long as I've known you, and I just anyway, thank you for being who you are, and I just wish we had more people, and there are many other people. Melba Evans, Wedgwood Church individuals. We have rabbis. We have Carolina Jews for Justice.
There's a few out there. There's a few out there. I believe.
There's a lot. Yeah. And so
we love y'all.
Yes. And so with that said, let's go around the Brady Bunch screen.
I still love Steve, even though he's kind of weirdo. Or what is the word? Typical?
He's not typical. That's
Not
right.
typical. That's dark true.
Let's go around the Brady Bunch screen and tell us where you're going to be. It is St. Bernie, Stephen, Jenny, Mama Ruth, and St. Bernie is going to be in his next week. So let's go. Stephen, you're next.
All right. This is convention season for the Libertarian Party, so I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff with that. But as the election year ramps up, remember, if you don't like what the Democrat establishment gives you for the Senate race, the Libertarian Party has an awesome candidate who's also for all your rights all the time this coming season. And we're probably going to have some really cool candidates coming up for local elections as well. So remember, folks, you have more choices than just the duopoly. And if you're interested, reach out to me, reach out to the LP, and we'll help bring you in. We'll convert you, my friends.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like an offer we can't refuse. But
No, that's another kind of thing.
Yeah, I know.
Nothing you can't refuse. I'm
You
Italian, but I'm
another
not that
stimulus
Italian.
check? Bigger check?
A different kind of Italian, right?
Yeah.
But for me, we have Transcend Charlotte and Charlotte Pride's T-Dub observation and celebration at the end of the month. It's always March 31st. So ours will be virtual this year because we're still not doing in-person events. But we have a slate of transgender performers that will be live up on the social media, and it's free of charge and anybody can watch. It'll be fabulous, but that it will be on March 31st, but you can go on our Facebook page or our Instagram page, and it's already up there and being advertised. So we are wrapping that up in the next 2 weeks. In fact, submissions, if you are a transgender person and you do want to perform in it, we're taking submissions all the way up to March 26th. So get in touch with Charlotte Pride and get the details if you do want to perform.
Awesome. March 31st. Don't forget, guys. So let's post it on our Facebook page. What am I going to be doing this week? Nothing. Just here. Oh, I'm on my way to PetSmart to buy this little thingy.
Oh, who is this?
That's ridiculous.
This is Cheeky. Say hi, Cheeky.
Cheeky.
Cheeky's 2 months old.
Oh.
I don't think she's gonna grow any bigger, or probably about a couple of pounds more.
Well, Mama Ruth, keep her away from peanuts and just.
My granddaughter loves peanuts, and she almost had one. I was like, oh no, no chocolate, no peanuts.
No, exactly.
So I'm gonna go to a PetSmart and get her a little sweater because she keeps on shaking every time we get her. You know how
Mhm.
Chihuahuas are. They're always shaky.
Mhm.
And I'll be here just supporting whatever I see around the community, making sure that I share the right information and keep us safe. Hey guys, don't forget, let's keep all those families in prayer. What happened last night in Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah.
it's hard to swallow. I mean, we have 8
Mhm.
families, 8 people that passed away. Just by they finally found one of the shooters, the 21-year-old Aaron. However, you know, it's sad to see all these young kids with guns and not valuing people's life.
Mhm.
So let's make sure and keep all those and keep us safe, you know,
Yeah.
for protection, because we might
Yeah,
go.
I saw that last night before I went to bed, and I haven't heard a lot about it, but it sounded like a mass shooting, and that
It was a
maybe
massacre, yeah, in 3 different places.
certain a certain
People,
was there a certain ethnic race that was targeted, or
Asian,
was that just by? Oh, okay.
Seems like it was
Asian,
Asians.
yeah,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
Asian, all
that's
females, and there were nail technicians, you know, at the beauty
mhm.
spa
Yeah,
salons.
yeah.
So we got to find out, you know, mental illness is a
Mhm.
big issue in this country. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of our city official and
Mhm.
governmental officials don't want to realize, and they don't want to
Mhm.
agree with that mental
Yeah.
illness issue. So
Well, well, thank you, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining us on Coffee and Buddies. We went way over. So thank you once again. This is more of a
thanks for this
dialogue.
spring cleaning
Yes,
transphobia
this is more,
episode. I loved it.
this was more of a dialogue than a show. I do want to say that our next week's show will be more of a show. It'll be faster, fast paced, and within an hour, we'll hopefully keep that in honor of Joe Odom, who one of the Joeisms. Remember, I don't know if y'all remember, but Joel would always said, "I kid you not, I kid you not, I kid you not." We will try to stay within the hour on the next show, and the next one is called "Living Latinx in White America." So it'll be how it is to have grown up in America, Latinx, but having to grow up white. And so I don't even know. Well, that's a really interesting topic. But I do want to say before we close the show and the music and
Hey,
stay
for
on.
some of the shows, we should have Mr. Andrew as our guest here.
No, he's way behind us. Speaking of that, I do want to wish him a happy anniversary. Today is our anniversary. We actually met a week before St. Patrick's Day, but we agreed to always celebrate St. Patrick's Day because it would be something that we could never forget. So
How many years? 26?
yes. Oh, it's been a while. It's a while. So happy anniversary to
Happy anniversary to y'all.
Andrew. And as soon as we finish here, I've got
And
to
happy
start.
birthday, Cindy.
Yes, happy birthday to our friend Cindy. Please, everyone, if you're able to get a vaccination, get vaccinated. And we will end on this song. Let's see if we can play this one. If it will play. Well, all right. Well, that's not going to work. As usual, music. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on Coffee and Ponduce.
Bye, Stephen.
We'll see you later, y'all. Bye.